An entire city can vanish from the world's memory. This video explores 20 lost cities found in places no one expected, revealing the incredible truth behind these ancient mysteries. You will gain a completely new understanding of human history, seeing how entire chapters of our past have been hidden in plain sight. How does a bustling metropolis simply disappear beneath a modern capital? What could cause a civilization to abandon its stone guardians on a remote island? The answers rewrite everything we thought we knew. What do you believe is the most fragile part of a civilization's legacy? That farmer's discovery opened a door to a world turned inside out. Instead of looking up at monuments, he stumbled into a civilization that looked down for its sanctuary. Derinkuyu is not just a series of caves, it is a meticulously planned inversion of a city. Think about the logistics of moving 20,000 people underground, along with everything needed to sustain them. This was not a temporary hideout, it was a parallel world built for endurance. The soft volcanic rock, known as tuff, made this possible, a stone that is easy to carve yet surprisingly strong, allowing generations to sculpt their safety from the very earth. They engineered a breathable environment with ventilation shafts that reach the surface with such precision that fresh air still circulates today. They tapped into underground rivers to create wells, ensuring a water supply even during the longest sieges. And the doors, massive circular stones that could be rolled across passageways, were the final, impenetrable barrier between the community and any threat from above. What is most profound is the implied story. This city speaks of a people who faced periods of profound insecurity, likely early Christians fleeing Roman persecution, who chose to invest staggering effort not in fortifying a hilltop, but in disappearing entirely. Their greatest architectural achievement was their own invisibility, a thriving metropolis that left no footprint on the landscape it lay beneath. It redefines where we expect to find the pulse of ancient life, proving that a society's heart could beat strongest in absolute darkness, waiting for the moment to return to the light. This theme of a city concealed not by human hands but reclaimed by the natural world leads us to a jungle so dense it swallowed a kingdom whole. The jungle did not hide Angkor, it simply grew over a civilization that had paused. Henry Mauhot, a French naturalist in the year 1860, pushed through the Cambodian undergrowth, following whispers of stone giants sleeping in the green shadows. What he found was not a single forgotten temple, but a landscape of architecture being slowly, patiently consumed. Towering silk cotton and strangler fig trees had woven their roots through doorways and over rooftops, their embrace both destructive and preservative, holding the stones together even as they pulled them apart. This was the heart of the Khmer Empire, a city called Angkor, and it had been silent for centuries. The immediate mystery was its sheer scale. Mauhot saw Angkor Wat, the magnificent temple complex, but he could not see the city it served. That revelation would require looking not through the dense canopy, but beneath it with technology he could never have imagined. Modern archaeology, using LIDAR, which is like a laser scanner flown from aircraft, has stripped away the jungle in digital form to reveal the truth. Angkor was not just a ceremonial site. It was a vast, low-density urban sprawl covering over 400 square miles, a network of canals, roads, and suburbs supporting a population that may have reached 1 million people at its peak. This made it one of the largest pre-industrial cities in the world. Its disappearance was not a sudden catastrophe, but a slow turning away. Research suggests a combination of factors, including prolonged drought and intense monsoon rains that damaged the intricate water management system the city depended upon, coupled with a shift in trade routes that diminished its economic power. The people did not vanish, they likely migrated. The jungle moved into the space they left behind, a green tide erasing the lines of roads and the outlines of homes, leaving only the grandest stone temples as stubborn reminders. Angkor challenges our idea of what it means to be lost. It was never missing, it was waiting, a testament to how quickly the natural world can reclaim even our most monumental endeavors. This conversation between civilization and environment takes a starkly different form in our next discovery, where a city did not wait for the desert to come, but was built directly within its most unforgiving embrace. The desert demands a different kind of genius, not to hide from the world but to command it. Johann Ludwig Burckhardt, a Swiss explorer in the year 1812, moved through the Jordanian landscape with a careful disguise, presenting himself as an Arab scholar to local guides. They led him through a narrow, winding slit in the sandstone, a corridor of rock so tight it felt like a passage into the earth itself. Then the canyon walls abruptly parted. Before him, glowing in the filtered sunlight, was a facade of impossible grandeur carved directly into the rose-red cliff. This was Al-Khosneh, the treasury, and with this single, breathtaking vision, the lost city of Petra roared back into Western memory. This was not a ruin being reclaimed by nature, it was a masterpiece engineered from it. The Nabateans, who built their capital here from around the 4th century before the Common Era, did not just occupy this landscape, they collaborated with it. Their wealth flowed from controlling the lucrative incense trade routes, a network of camel caravans carrying frankincense and myrrh across the desert. But their true innovation was not in what they traded, but how they survived where they chose to live. Petra is a monument to hydrological engineering. In an arid environment where water was more precious than any spice, the Nabateans sculpted the very rock to capture every possible drop. They created a complex system of dams to divert flash floods, carved channels and pipes into the cliffs to guide water, and built vast underground cisterns to store it. This network turned seasonal deluges into a reliable, year-round resource, allowing gardens to grow and a population of perhaps 20,000 to thrive in the heart of the desert. The city's abandonment was a slow unraveling. Major earthquakes in the 4th and 7th centuries damaged the vital water management system. Perhaps more critically, sea-based trade routes began to eclipse the overland caravan roads, slowly draining Petra's economic lifeblood. The people eventually left and the desert silence returned. Petra's rediscovery reminds us that a city's greatest strength can become the very thing that conceals it. Its strategic choice to build within an impregnable fortress of stone meant that when it was finally empty, it simply faded back into the geology, a secret kept by the cliffs that had once been its walls. This idea of a city preserved by the elements takes an even more extreme form, where not stone but ice becomes the perfect guardian of a forgotten world. The perfect guardian of a city is not always stone, but sometimes a permanent shroud of mist and altitude. Hiram Bingham, an American historian, pushed through the wet cloud forest of the Peruvian Andes in the year 1911, his journey guided by whispers from local Quechua farmers. A young boy from a nearby settlement finally led him up a nearly vertical slope, through thick vegetation that clung to the mountainside. What emerged from the green veil was not a single structure, but a symphony in stone. Machu Picchu, the legendary lost city of the Inca, lay before him, a silent citadel woven into the spine of the mountain itself. This was not a city that had fallen, it had been carefully set aside. Built in the 15th century as a royal estate for Emperor Pachacuti, it was a place of retreat, ceremony, and connection to the cosmos. Its life was tragically brief. Within a century, the Spanish conquest swept through the Inca Empire. Yet, as forts fell and cities were occupied, Machu Picchu's secret remained intact. The Inca never revealed its location to the invaders, allowing the jungle to quietly reclaim its terraces and temples, preserving it not through destruction, but through deliberate omission. Its engineering is a dialogue with the impossible. Perched at almost 8,000 feet, the builders mastered the mountain without mortar, cutting and fitting giant granite blocks so precisely that not even a knife blade can slide between them, a technique that has withstood centuries of earthquakes. The entire city is an astronomical observatory, with temples and windows aligned to catch the solstice sun and sacred peaks known as apus or mountain spirits. Machu Picchu feels less constructed and more revealed, as if the Inca simply cleared away the vegetation to find the sacred geometry already written in the land. Its discovery forced the world to reconsider the Inca not just as conquerors, but as spiritual architects who integrated their society into the very fabric of the Andes. It stands as the ultimate high-altitude sanctuary, a city lost because it was never meant to be found by outsiders, its legacy frozen in time by isolation and reverence. This idea of a civilization interrupted at its peak finds a haunting parallel not in the mountains, but in the opposite extreme, where a vibrant city was swallowed not by green, but by blue, vanishing beneath the waves in a single catastrophic day. The seafloor near Abukir Bay holds more than shipwrecks. In the early 2000s, a French archaeologist named Frank Goddio led a team that was methodically mapping the submerged Egyptian coastline when their sonar began returning impossible shapes. Diving into the murky green water, their lights did not illuminate broken pottery or scattered stones, but an entire cityscape lying in silent repose. A colossal red granite statue of a pharaoh over 16 feet tall stared up from the silt. Nearby, a stone stele perfectly preserved bore the decree of a pharaoh. Giant stone piers and the foundations of massive temples emerged from the darkness. This was not a random collection of artifacts. This was Thonis, known to the Greeks as Heracleion, a legendary gateway city that had simply vanished beneath the waves. For centuries, it was thought to be a myth, a place mentioned by ancient historians like Herodotus but with no physical trace. Its discovery was the equivalent of finding Atlantis. Heracleion was the mandatory port of entry for all Greek trade with Egypt for centuries, a bustling, cosmopolitan hub where cultures and goods flowed together. The sheer scale of the statues, the weight of the gold coins, and the number of ship anchors found their speak to its immense wealth and traffic. Its end was not a sudden, dramatic plunge, but a gradual surrender. Research points to a perfect storm of geological misfortune. The city was built on the unstable clay and sediment of the Nile Delta, a combination of rising sea levels, a series of major earthquakes, and the phenomenon of soil liquefaction, where solid ground essentially turns to liquid under seismic pressure, caused the entire area to sink. Over perhaps a century, the buildings, the temples, the docks, and the streets slowly descended until the Mediterranean closed over them completely. The water, which had been the source of its life and wealth, became its shroud. The preservation is astonishing because the silt and lack of oxygen created a kind of time capsule, freezing a moment of daily life and international commerce. We can see the cultural fusion in the artifacts, Egyptian gods alongside Greek inscriptions, showing a city that thrived on connection. Heracleion forces us to confront a different kind of loss, where the landscape itself becomes unstable, swallowing the evidence of human achievement into a silent, blue archive. This theme of a thriving hub erased by natural disaster finds a terrifying parallel in a city that was not swallowed by water, but instantly buried by fire and stone. The plaster casts of Pompeii are not statues but voids in time. In the year 1748, workers digging a canal for the King of Naples struck not earth but a painted wall. This chance discovery began the systematic unearthing of a city that had not been lost to centuries of slow decay, but sealed in a single, terrible day. When Mount Vesuvius erupted in the year 79 of the Common Era, it did not just destroy Pompeii, it performed a ghastly act of preservation. A cascade of superheated ash and pumice, falling at an incredible rate, buried the city under a layer 13 to 20 feet deep, entombing everything in a sterile, airtight tomb. This is what makes Pompeii unique among all lost cities. It is not a place people left, it is a moment they lived in, captured with heartbreaking immediacy. We see the loaves of bread carbonized in the baker's oven. We read the casual graffiti on street walls, messages of friendship, political endorsements, and simple boasts. We walk into homes with intricate mosaics still gleaming on the floors. The city's story is written in these mundane, breathtaking details, but the most poignant records are the spaces where people were. As the ash hardened around organic material that later decayed, it left perfect cavities in the shape of bodies. Archaeologists in the 19th century began pouring plaster into these voids, creating casts of the victims at the precise moment of their passing. We see a family huddled together, a man covering his mouth, a dog curled in a final, futile twist. These are not artistic recreations, they are direct impressions from the event itself. This level of detail provides an archaeological fidelity that is simply impossible at a site abandoned over generations. At Pompeii, we are not piecing together a puzzle from scattered fragments. We are walking into a room where the puzzle was frozen mid-assembly. It allows historians to understand Roman life with an intimacy no ancient text can provide, from the engineering of their plumbing to the layout of their taverns to the pigments in their paint. The city's concealment was both absolute and instantaneous, a geological snapshot that preserved a vibrant society in its final breath. This stands in stark contrast to our next discovery, where a city was not buried in a day, but was slowly, patiently erased by a drifting sea of sand. The stone walls of Great Zimbabwe rise from the savannah with a quiet, undeniable authority. When European explorers like Karl Marx stumbled upon these ruins in the late 19th century, they were confronted by a reality their worldview could not accept. Soaring, unmortared stone enclosures and a mysterious conical tower stood as monuments to a sophisticated, thriving civilization. Yet, rather than crediting the local Shona people, these early visitors spun fantastical tales, attributing the city to foreign powers like the Queen of Sheba or Phoenician traders. This refusal to see the evidence before them created a second kind of burial, one not of sand, but of prejudice, attempting to conceal an African achievement beneath a colonial narrative. Great Zimbabwe was the heart of a kingdom that flourished from the 11th to the 15th centuries, a hub in a vast trading network that stretched to the Swahili coast and beyond. Its wealth was built on gold and ivory, commodities that connected the interior of southern Africa to the Indian Ocean and the wider world. The artifacts found within its walls tell this global story. Fragments of Chinese celadon pottery, Persian glass, and Arab coins lie alongside local crafts, painting a picture of a cosmopolitan center. The architecture itself is the greatest testament to its builders' skill. The massive, curving walls are constructed using a technique called dry stonewalling, where granite blocks are carefully shaped and stacked without any mortar, fitting together with such precision that they have endured for centuries. The great enclosure, with its iconic tower, remains the largest ancient structure in sub-Saharan Africa. Its purpose is still debated, possibly a royal residence or a ceremonial site, but its scale speaks to a highly organized and powerful society. The city's decline appears to have been gradual, likely tied to environmental factors like overgrazing and the depletion of local resources, which led the population to disperse. But its modern recovery is a story of reclamation. Following Zimbabwe's independence, the nation took its name from this ancient city, embracing it as a powerful symbol of pre-colonial achievement and cultural resilience. The ruins stand not just as a lost trading hub found, but as a truth unearthed, challenging us to question whose history gets remembered and whose gets buried by the sands of bias. This struggle to see a city hidden within a dominant narrative finds a startling physical parallel in our next discovery. where an entire ancient metropolis lies concealed beneath the bustling streets of a modern capital. The electric cables would have to wait. In 1978, construction workers in Mexico City's bustling central square were digging a simple trench when their shovels struck something that should not have been there. It was not a pipe or a rock, but the edge of a colossal stone disc intricately carved with the image of a dismembered goddess. In that moment, the modern pavement cracked open, and the heart of a vanished empire began to beat again. This was Coyolxauhqui, the moon goddess, and her discovery was the key that unlocked the Templo Maya, the great temple of the Aztec capital, Tenochtitlan. The Spanish conquistadors who razed the city in 1521 had done their work thoroughly, but they could not erase its footprint. They built their own cathedral and palaces directly atop the sacred precinct, layer upon layer, until the magnificent island city existed only in historical texts and local memory. The modern metropolis had grown over it, completely unaware it was walking on the ceiling of another world. The ongoing excavation is like performing delicate surgery on a living patient. Archaeologists must work between subway tunnels and sewer lines, carefully peeling back the colonial era to reveal the Aztec foundations beneath. What they find is staggering in its scale and artistry. They uncover ritual offerings of jade, sea shells from distant coasts, and intricate models of temples placed as gifts to the gods. The architecture itself reveals a people who mastered a challenging environment, building a grand city on an island in the middle of a lake, connected by causeways and nourished by chinampas, ingenious floating gardens made of woven reeds and rich mud that created incredibly fertile plots of land. This was not a remote outpost, but a bustling, engineered marvel that awed the Spanish upon their arrival. The discovery forces a profound reconsideration of place. Mexico City is not simply built where Tenochtitlan once stood, it is built from it. The stones of the Aztec temples likely lie within the walls of the oldest colonial buildings. The city's very layout, with the grand Zocalo Square at its center, echoes the ancient ceremonial plaza. This is a loss and a rediscovery of an entirely different order, where the past is not a separate ruin to visit, but the literal ground beneath your feet. It proves that a civilization is never fully erased. It simply becomes the foundation for what comes next, waiting centuries for a chance encounter with a construction crew to whisper its story once more. This idea of a city living on as a foundation finds a parallel in a place where the past did not stay buried, but was actively, mysteriously, buried again and again. The statues arrived on the island before the people did. That is the profound mystery that confronted the first European sailors when their ships sighted the remote speck of land they called Easter Island in the year 1722. They saw a treeless, windswept landscape seemingly incapable of supporting a large population. Yet scattered across it were hundreds of colossal stone figures, the moai, standing with their backs to the ocean, their impassive faces gazing inward over a territory that appeared utterly empty. It was as if the gods themselves had placed these giants there and then departed, leaving no instructions. This was Rapa Nui, the most isolated inhabited island on Earth, and its story is a haunting lesson in what happens when ambition outpaces an ecosystem. The immediate question was not just who built them, but how. Each moai is a multi-ton megalith carved from compressed volcanic ash at a single quarry. The largest one ever raised stands over 30 feet tall and weighs roughly 82 tons. For a society with no metal tools, no wheels, and no large animals for draft power, moving these statues miles across rugged terrain seems like an impossibility. The answer reveals a society of brilliant, pragmatic engineers. Researchers, through experiments and careful study of abandoned statues along ancient roads, have demonstrated they likely moved the moai in a walking fashion. By rocking the statue side to side with ropes, teams could literally make the giant figure walk forward. a method that explains the many moai found face down along the old transport routes, as if they stumbled and could not be righted. This was a communal effort of staggering coordination, a cultural project that defined their society for generations. But this very project contained the seeds of its own undoing. To move the statues, they needed massive quantities of strong timber for rollers, levers, and ropes. They also needed to clear land for agriculture to feed a growing population. The island's once lush palm forests were cut down, and they never grew back. Without trees, the soil eroded. Without large wood, they could no build fishing canoes to access deep-sea protein. The ecological foundation crumbled. Research suggests this led to a period of profound hardship, with food sources dwindling and social structures fracturing. The statues, once symbols of ancestral power and communal unity, were toppled in what appears to have been internal conflict. The civilization did not vanish, but it transformed, shrinking and adapting to a much harsher reality. Recent archaeology adds deeper layers to the tragedy. The moai are not solitary figures. They are the focal points of ceremonial platforms called ahu, which were also family tombs. The islanders also developed a unique script, rongo-rongo, carved on wooden tablets. It is one of the very few independent inventions of writing in human history, yet every native speaker who could read it was gone before scholars arrived, and it remains undeciphered to this day, a final, silent testament to a lost intellectual world. Rapa Nui is not a simple tale of collapse, but a complex parable of isolation and consequence. It shows a society that poured its heart and soul into monumental works of spiritual meaning, only to discover that the very act of creation could consume the world that made it possible. The moai stand as eternal guardians, not of a thriving city, but of a powerful warning etched in stone, their blank eyes holding the reflection of a choice every civilization must eventually face. This theme of a society reaching a zenith only to be halted finds a different echo in a city that was not consumed by its own resources, but was mysteriously abandoned at the height of its power. Heinrich Schliemann held a copy of Homer's Iliad not as a scholar, but as a treasure map. This German businessman turned self-taught archaeologist arrived at a nondescript mound in northwest Turkey called Hisarlik in the 1870s, utterly convinced the epic poems were literal history. With relentless drive and notoriously rough methods, he dug massive trenches straight through the layers of the mound. What he uncovered was far more complex than a single fallen city. He found evidence of multiple settlements, one stacked atop the other like chapters in a forgotten book. At one level, he discovered burned debris, gold jewelry, and evidence of a violent end. He immediately declared this to be the Troy of King Priam, the very city besieged by Agamemnon's armies for the beautiful Helen. While his dramatic pronouncements and destructive techniques are criticized by modern archaeologists, his core intuition was revolutionary. He proved that a place sung about for millennia could have a physical address. Subsequent, more careful excavations have confirmed Hisarlik as the historical Troy, a pivotal Bronze Age citadel that controlled the vital sea lanes through the Dardanelles. Its strategic position made it wealthy from taxing trade, and also made it a target. A layer of destruction dating to around 1180 before the Common Era aligns with the traditional timeline for a major conflict, suggesting a real war that later generations would weave into a foundational myth of heroes and gods. The discovery did something profound. It built a bridge between the shimmering world of legend and the solid ground of history. It showed that the stories we tell for centuries can contain a kernel of geographical and historical truth, even if the details are amplified by countless retellings. Troy's true story is not one of a single loss, but of repeated rebirth. The city was destroyed by conflict or earthquake at least 9 times across millennia, and each time its people returned to rebuild directly upon the rubble of the old. Each new city was a literal burial of the past, a conscious or unconscious act of preservation through layering. This creates a powerful metaphor, how a place can be lost not just to time, but to its own successive futures, each incarnation hiding the one that came before. This concept of a civilization building over its own past finds a breathtaking parallel in a far more remote location, where an entire kingdom chose a mountain range as its fortress and its tomb. The highest cities are not built for conquest but for contemplation. In the 1930s, Italian scholar Giuseppe Tucci journeyed into the western Tibetan plateau, a landscape of stark, wind-scoured valleys that seemed to hold only emptiness. Then, rising from the barren earth like a natural cathedral, he saw it, a colossal pyramid-shaped mountain of clay, its sheer faces honeycombed with caves and crowned with the crumbling white walls of a fortress. This was Tsaparang, the lost capital of the ancient Guge kingdom, a city that chose the roof of the world as its sanctuary. For 7 centuries, from the 10th to the 17th, this was not a remote outpost but a vibrant hub. It sat on a branch of the Silk Road, where the exchange was not just silks and spices but ideas. Tsaparang became a major center for the translation of Buddhist scriptures and a flourishing school of art, its artists blending influences from India, Nepal, and Central Asia into a style uniquely their own. The city was an architectural marvel of adaptation, carved directly into the soft clay mountain. Palaces, monasteries, and libraries were not built upon the rock, but within it, a labyrinthine vertical city designed for both defense and devotion. Its end came not with a slow decline, but a sharp, decisive break. Historical accounts point to a brutal siege in the 1630s, possibly connected to regional conflicts. Some researchers also suggest a catastrophic failure of the complex water supply system, a lifeline in that arid environment. The city was abandoned, its exquisite murals left to fade under the relentless sun and scouring winds, its precious manuscripts left to the silence. And here lies the paradox of its preservation. Its extreme remoteness and punishing climate, the very factors that made life there a daily struggle, became its protectors. Looters and developers never reached it. Tsaparang was not plundered, it was simply left behind, a perfect snapshot of a civilization frozen at the moment it turned out the lights. To stand in its empty chapels where vibrant paintings of deities still cover the walls is to witness a library of faith and culture left open on a forgotten page. It speaks of a society whose greatest ambition was to create a beacon of wisdom in the most inhospitable place imaginable, a spiritual ambition so powerful it justified a city in the sky. Its loss was a matter of geography becoming destiny, the world forgetting the path to its door. This stands in stark contrast to a city that was not lost to distance, but deliberately erased from maps and memory by the very state that built it. The sealed necropolis was never meant to be found by the living. In the spring of 1974, a group of farmers digging a well near the city of Zion struck not water, but something infinitely stranger, a fragment of a life-sized clay face staring back from the dark earth. This chance encounter, as simple as a shovel hitting pottery, cracked open the seal on one of history's most astonishing secrets, the mausoleum of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China. He was the man who unified the warring states into a single empire, standardized writing and currency, and began the Great Wall. But his most ambitious project was not for the living world, it was for the eternity he believed awaited him. He ordered the construction of a complete underground mirror of his empire, a necropolis to serve him in the afterlife, and then he ensured its location would be forgotten. For more than 2,000 years it worked. The great burial mound, a man-made hill covered in trees, stood quietly in the landscape, its contents the stuff of legend recorded by the historian Sima Qian but dismissed by many as myth. Those ancient texts spoke of palaces filled with treasures, ceilings inlaid with pearls to mimic the night sky, and crossbow traps set to kill any intruder. Most fantastically, they described rivers and seas of shimmering, toxic mercury, representing the waters of his realm, flowing through the subterranean landscape. Modern scientific surveys have detected unusually high concentrations of mercury in the soil around the mound, suggesting those legends may hold a startling grain of truth. The true scale of the emperor's vision, however, lay in the surrounding fields. The farmers had discovered just one pit of what we now know is a vast, organized city for the dead. Archaeologists have since uncovered thousands of life-sized terracotta soldiers, each one with unique facial features, hairstyles, and armor, arranged in precise military formation. There are chariots with terracotta horses, bronze sculptures of waterbirds, and figures of acrobats and officials, a complete bureaucratic and entertainment corps frozen in time. This was not a symbolic gesture, it was a literal transplantation of an entire imperial court into the earth, built by an estimated 700,000 laborers over nearly 4 decades. The purpose was absolute: to remain hidden forever, to protect the emperor's journey and assert his power beyond death itself. Its accidental discovery transforms it from a private sanctuary into a public wonder. It forces us to confront a staggering paradox, a monument of unimaginable effort and artistry that was designed to never be seen by human eyes again. This stands as the ultimate act of concealment, not by nature or time, but by deliberate human intention, a city lost because its creator commanded it to be so. The dust of the Soup Valley held a secret older than the pharaohs. In the 1990s, archaeologists were studying a series of large, eroded mounds in this arid Peruvian landscape, structures locals had long considered natural hills. Applying radiocarbon dating to material found within, they received a result that sent shockwaves through the historical community. This place, called Caral, was not just old, it was foundational, with origins reaching back to around 2600 before the Common Era. This made it the oldest known city in the Americas, a contemporary of the Great Pyramids of Giza, yet built on a completely separate continent. Here was a Genesis story written in adobe and stone, entirely independent of Egypt or Mesopotamia. Caral was not a primitive settlement, it was a fully realized urban center. The complex includes 6 large pyramidal structures, sunken circular plazas that likely served as gathering spaces for ceremony and exchange, and distinct residential districts that suggest a stratified society. Its economy was built on agriculture, harnessing the waters of the Soup River, and on a vast trade network. Archaeologists found evidence of goods like dried anchovies and shells from the distant coast, and jungle plants from over the Andes, proving this early city was already connected to a wide world. Most strikingly, researchers have found no trace of fortifications, no weapons, and no signs of warfare in its art or architecture. Caral appears to have flourished for centuries as a peaceful, ceremonial, and commercial hub, a model of civilization born from cooperation rather than conflict. Its end came around 2000 before the Common Era, not from invasion but likely from environmental shifts. A prolonged drought may have destabilized the agricultural system the city depended upon, leading its inhabitants to gradually disperse to more reliable areas. The city was not destroyed, it was simply left to the wind and sand, its pyramids slowly melting back into the desert landscape until they became indistinguishable from the earth itself. The rediscovery of Caral did more than add an ancient city to the map, it shattered a timeline. It proved that the impulse toward complex urban life in the Americas was not a late development, but a parallel flowering of human ingenuity that sprang from the fertile river valleys of Peru millennia before the rise of the Maya or the Inca. This narrative of independent genesis forces us to widen our view of human history, to see not a single story of progress radiating from the old world, but multiple stories of civilization being invented again and again in the most unexpected of cradles. This journey from a peaceful genesis now leads us to a civilization defined by its dramatic, enigmatic climax, a culture whose sudden silence in the jungle has spawned endless speculation. The silence of a jungle is never truly empty. In the mid-19th century, a Guatemalan official named Modesto Méndez, accompanied by local chicleros who harvested tree sap for chewing gum, pushed beyond the known trails of the Patane rainforest. The air was thick with humidity and the calls of unseen creatures, the ground a tangle of roots and vines. Then, the dense green wall suddenly gave way to a sight that defied logic. Soaring above the treetops were immense limestone pyramids, their stepped sides softened by moss but their geometric forms unmistakably the work of human hands. They had stumbled into the great plaza of Tikal, a city that had not been abandoned so much as absorbed. Here was a capital of such scale that the jungle had taken centuries to fully swallow it, leaving only the tips of its grandest temples as stone islands in a sea of green. At its zenith around the year 700 of the Common Era, Tikal was a metropolis of staggering influence, home to perhaps 100,000 people. Its rulers, known as Kayuhul Ajor or Holy Lords, commanded a network of alliances and conflicts across the Maya world. The city's core was a carefully planned landscape of power, with vast paved plazas for public ceremony, multi-story palaces where the elite lived and administered, and the iconic towering temples that served as portals to the heavens. To stand atop Temple 4, the tallest, was to literally rise above the rainforest canopy, looking out over a city that represented the pinnacle of Maya urban achievement. Yet this dominance contained its own vulnerabilities. The very success of Tikal, its growing population and expanding agricultural demands, placed immense pressure on the surrounding environment. Decades of research now point to a confluence of crises now called the Maya Classic Collapse. Centuries of intensive farming and the need for vast amounts of timber and plaster for construction led to widespread deforestation. This environmental change, coupled with a series of severe, prolonged droughts documented in lake sediment cores, likely triggered a catastrophic failure. Crop yields fell, water sources dwindled, and the social contract that held the city together began to fray. The intricate system of kingship and ceremony that justified the ruler's power could not withstand the basic crisis of hunger and thirst. People did not vanish, but they gradually dispersed from the urban center, migrating to smaller, more sustainable settlements. The jungle moved swiftly into the space they left behind, its roots prying apart stonework, its foliage burying palaces under layers of soil and leaf litter. For over a millennium, Tikal's story was mute. Its rediscovery was only the first step, the physical finding of the stones. The true resurrection of its voice began with the painstaking decipherment of Maya glyphs in the latter half of the 20th century. Those intricate inscriptions on stone stelae and temple walls, once considered mere decoration, were revealed to be a complete writing system. Scholars learned to read the names of kings like Jasor Chan Kayawil, the dates of pivotal battles, the records of astronomical events, and the intricate calendar that guided Maya life. The silent ruins suddenly had biographies. We learned Tikal was not an isolated sanctuary, but a player in a dynamic political landscape of shifting alliances and rivalries, most famously with the distant city of Calakmul. Their struggle for dominance spanned generations, a geopolitical chess game recorded in stone and now understood by modern eyes. This intellectual rediscovery is perhaps as significant as the archaeological one. It transformed our view of the Maya from a mysterious, peace-loving people obsessed with time to a complex civilization of city-states with histories of war, diplomacy, trade, and profound scientific inquiry. Tikal stands as the ultimate testament to nature's reclaiming power, a place where stone giants were slowly buried under a living, green blanket. Its silence was so complete that only when we learned its language could we finally hear the echoes of the bustling city that once ruled the rainforest. The jungle canopy is the perfect camouflage. For centuries, the dense, unbroken green of the Bolivian Amazon seemed to tell a simple story, a vast wilderness where only small, nomadic tribes could survive, leaving no permanent mark on the landscape. This assumption was so deeply held it shaped textbooks and documentaries. Then, a team of researchers pointed a new kind of eye at the forest. Using LIDAR, a technology that sends millions of laser pulses from an aircraft to digitally strip away every leaf and vine, they revealed a secret geography. Beneath the living roof, the ground told a different story. Etched into the earth were the precise, geometric shapes of civilization, causeways stretching for miles, concentric rings of moats, and massive, raised platforms that once supported pyramids and plazas. This was the work of the Kasarab culture, a society that thrived here from around 500 to 1400 of the Common Era. Sites like Kotoka were not villages, they were the heart of a complex, low-density urban network. The people sculpted their environment with astonishing sophistication, building canals and reservoirs to manage the seasonal floods and droughts, turning a challenging ecosystem into a productive landscape. They connected their ceremonial centers with raised causeways that functioned as roads in the wet season, weaving a social fabric across the forest. This discovery shatters an old narrative. The Amazon was not a pristine, empty wilderness, but a managed, anthropogenic landscape, home to societies that achieved a scale and complexity we are only beginning to comprehend. These settlements represent a unique form of loss. They were not buried by sand or water, but rendered invisible by the very success of the rainforest they helped to shape. When the society eventually declined, likely due to a combination of social and environmental shifts, the forest simply grew back, erasing the lines of their world with a blanket of green. It took a technology that could see through leaves to finally notice the architecture beneath our feet. This technological leap does more than find a single city. It rewrites an entire chapter of human history and suggests a thrilling possibility that countless more organized settlements may lie hidden, waiting for the right tool to reveal their contours. That same tool, peering into another impossible landscape, would soon unveil a city of a completely different character, one built not to manage the jungle, but to defy the desert itself. The temple was never hidden, it was simply unreachable. For the early 20th century French colonial surveyors, the journey to the Dangrek Mountains was an act of endurance, a slow, arduous climb up a treacherous escarpment that formed a natural border. Their goal was not a lost city, but a known landmark, the spectacular cliff-top complex of Preah. What they documented, however, was a monument in a state of profound isolation, a masterpiece of the Khmer Empire that had been severed from the world not by jungle, but by shifting politics and the sheer difficulty of access. Built primarily in the 11th and 12th centuries under Kings Suryavarman I and Suryavarman II, this was no ordinary temple. While Angkor Wat celebrated the cosmic world in a vast horizontal plain, Vihear was a vertical journey toward the heavens. Dedicated to the Hindu god Shiva, its design is a literal ascent along a north-south axis, a series of soaring pavilions and grand staircases climbing for over half a mile along the razorback ridge of the mountain. To reach the final sanctuary, pilgrims would have walked a symbolic path from the mundane world up into the realm of the gods, with the entire Cambodian plain stretching out 800 meters below their feet, a breathtaking vista that made the divine feel intimately close. This strategic and sacred location, however, contained the seeds of its own obscurity. As the power of the Khmer Empire waned and political centers shifted, the arduous pilgrimage routes fell into disuse. The temple's extreme remoteness, which had preserved its stunning architecture and intricate carvings from being consumed by vegetation like its lowland cousins, now became its prison. It was not buried but stranded, a sovereign piece of stone hovering in a geopolitical limbo. Its modern history became a mirror of its ancient one, a site of intense conflict and contested memory. For much of the 20th and into the 21st century, the temple sat at the heart of a bitter border dispute between Cambodia and Thailand, a situation that made it a military flashpoint and kept scholars and conservators at a distance. This is a completely different kind of vanishing act. Vihear was never physically lost. Its stones were always visible against the sky. It was lost to meaning, to context, to its place in the living culture it was built to serve. Its rediscovery was not a matter of clearing away vines, but of navigating a fragile piece to restore access and understanding. It reminds us that a site can be erased from the human story just as effectively by a disputed line on a map as by 1,000 years of jungle growth. Its enduring presence on that cliff face is a testament to an architectural ambition that defied gravity, while its turbulent modern life shows how the legacy of a sacred place can become entangled in the very human struggles for land and identity. This concept of a city defined by its precarious, elevated position finds a parallel in a place that took the opposite approach, building not towards the sky, but deep into the protective embrace of the earth. The rock itself was the city. In the rolling landscape of eastern Georgia, a traveler along the old Silk Road would have encountered not a cluster of buildings, but a sheer sandstone cliff face that seemed to breathe human life. Windows, doorways, and staircases were carved directly into the soft stone, a sprawling, multi-level metropolis known as Uplistsikhe, literally translated as the fortress of the Lord. This was not a settlement built upon the earth, it was a settlement excavated from it, a hollowed-out mountain that served as a bustling hub of commerce, culture, and community for nearly 3,000 years. From its origins in the early Iron Age, around the 10th century before the Common Era, it grew into a vital node where the caravan routes between Asia and Europe converged. Within its labyrinthine passages, you could find the echoes of a complete society. There was a large, rock-cut theater for public gatherings, its stepped seating facing a natural stage. There were dedicated chambers that functioned as a pharmacy, with niches carved into the walls to hold medicinal herbs and potions. The scent of baking bread would have wafted from communal bakeries, complete with circular ovens carved from the floor. Later, as Christianity spread through the region, ancient pagan altars were adapted into chapels and churches, their crosses chiseled beside much older symbols. This was urban engineering in its most literal form, a process of subtraction rather than addition. The soft sandstone was ideal for carving but durable enough to last, and the very structure of the city provided its own solutions. The maze of tunnels and narrow passages offered natural fortification, making the city incredibly difficult to assault. The stone mass also acted as a perfect insulator, keeping the interiors cool in the fierce summer heat and retaining warmth during the cold winters, a built-in climate control system that required no fuel. Its decline was a slow fading, not a sudden crash. While the Mongol invasions of the 13th century dealt a severe blow to its importance as a trade center, the city was not destroyed. People simply began to leave, migrating to newer, more accessible settlements in the valleys below. The rooms were emptied, the stairways fell silent, and the great rock was left to the wind. Yet here, loss created a perfect kind of preservation. The dry climate and the enduring nature of the carved stone meant that the city did not crumble, it merely went dormant. To walk its streets today is to move through a fossilized moment where the handprints of the architects are still visible in the tool marks on the walls, and the function of each space remains hauntingly clear. Uplistsikhe challenges our most basic definition of a city. It proves that urban life does not require rising upward, but can instead plunge inward, finding safety, community, and identity within the bones of the world itself. Its story is one of quiet desertion, a place not erased by catastrophe but gently set aside by time, leaving its empty rooms as a perfect echo of the lives that once filled them. This idea of a city preserved in a state of suspended animation finds a startling contrast in our next discovery, where an entire civilization was not set aside, but utterly submerged by a rising tide it could not hold back. The bricks were all the same size. In the 1920s, archaeologists like Rakhaldas Banerjee began peeling back layers of earth from a nondescript mound in the Sindh region of what is now Pakistan. What emerged from the dry soil was not a haphazard collection of ruins, but a masterclass in urban planning, a city of astonishing order called Mohenjo-Daro. This was not a settlement that grew organically over time. It felt as if it had been designed from a single, brilliant blueprint and then brought to life. Its wide, straight streets were laid out in a precise grid pattern, intersecting at perfect right angles. Every house, from the largest to the more modest, was constructed from standardized, kiln-fired bricks of a uniform ratio, a level of civic coordination that feels startlingly modern. But the true genius of this city, which flourished around 2,500 years before the Common Era, lay beneath those streets. They engineered the world's first known comprehensive urban sanitation system. A network of covered drains ran alongside the main avenues, connecting to smaller channels from individual homes, all designed to carry waste away from the living spaces. They even included periodic inspection holes for maintenance. This was a society that invested collective effort not in glorifying a single ruler, but in safeguarding the health and harmony of the entire community. With a potential population of 40,000 people, Mohenjo-Daro stood as one of the largest and most advanced cities of the ancient world, a peer to the civilizations of Mesopotamia and Egypt. Yet its story is written in whispers, not shouts. The most profound mystery is what we do not find. There are no towering palaces, no grand temples dedicated to a deified king, no monumental statues celebrating military conquest. The largest structures appear to be a great bath, possibly for ritual purification, and a massive granary for storing the city's harvest. This absence speaks volumes. It suggests a social organization that may have been remarkably balanced, a complex urban life where authority was perhaps more administrative and collective than autocratic. Their artistry is found in small, exquisite seals carved with animals and a script of 400 symbols that, to this day, remains undeciphered. It is a language etched in stone that we see but cannot read, a silent conversation we are forever eavesdropping on. The city's end is as quiet as its artifacts. Around 1900 before the Common Era, people began to leave. The streets slowly emptied. Research points not to a sudden invasion, but to a slow environmental unraveling. Theories suggest a combination of factors, including climate change that may have dried up vital water sources, and the shifting course of the mighty Indus River that once nourished its fields. The lifeblood of the city simply moved away and the people followed. Over centuries, wind-blown silt and river sediment gently buried the orderly streets, preserving the city not through catastrophe, but through a slow, patient blanket of dust. Mohenjo-Daro offers a different vision of what civilization could be, a model of communal ingenuity and planned harmony that flourished for centuries and then faded without a clear single cause. It presents us with a blueprint for a city we can walk through, measure, and marvel at, yet whose heart, captured in that unread script, remains a gentle, enduring secret. The cattle had wandered into a hidden world. In the winter of 1888, ranchers Richard Wetherill and Charlie Mason were tracking stray animals through the snow-dusted canyons of southwest Colorado, a landscape of stark mesas and deep, shadowy clefts. As they peered over the edge of a steep canyon, expecting to see only rock and scrub, their eyes adjusted to a sight that seemed to defy gravity. Clinging to the sheer sandstone wall, sheltered within a vast natural alcove, was an entire village of stone and mortar. Ladders that once connected multiple stories now lay broken, and darkened doorways and windows stared out like empty eyes. They had discovered Cliff Palace at Mesa Verde, a city built not upon the earth but within its very skin. This was the work of the ancestral Pueblones, a people who had thrived in the region for centuries, initially building their communities on the mesa tops. But around the 12th century, for reasons that still spark debate, a significant portion of the population made a dramatic architectural shift. They moved down off the open plateaus and into the recesses of the cliffs themselves. The scale of their ambition is breathtaking. Cliff Palace alone contains over 150 rooms and 23 kivas, which are circular, subterranean chambers used for ceremonial and social gatherings. To construct this, they had to haul thousands of tons of sandstone blocks, timber, and water up from the canyon floor or down from the mesa top, an almost unimaginable logistical feat without beasts of burden or wheeled carts. The location was a masterpiece of practical genius. The south-facing alcoves provided passive solar heating in the winter, while the overhanging rock offered shade and coolness in the summer. The cliffs acted as a natural fortress, protecting the community with a sheer drop that made attack nearly impossible. Their very homes were their citadel. Yet this ingenious adaptation also created a profound vulnerability. Life in the cliffs was entirely dependent on the delicate balance of the world above. Their fields were still on the mesa tops, a long, arduous climb away each day. Their survival hinged on predictable rainfall to nourish their crops of corn, beans, and squash. In the late 13th century, that balance shattered. Tree ring data reveals a period of severe, prolonged drought, a mega-drought that gripped the region for over 2 decades. The springs and seeps in the canyon walls likely dried up. The mesa top soils, already stressed by generations of farming, became barren. In such isolation, with their resources stretched to a breaking point, the social fabric would have been under immense strain. There is no evidence of invasion or conflict with outside groups. Instead, the dwellings show signs of a deliberate, orderly departure. Doorways were sealed, and precious items were left behind, perhaps as offerings or because they were too cumbersome to carry on a long journey. Over a generation or two, the people simply left, migrating south to join other Pueblo communities along the Rio Grande and in Arizona. They did not vanish, they moved on, seeking a place where the rain still fell. The cliffs, which had been their shelter, became their museum. The dry desert air and the protective overhang preserved the structures almost perfectly, freezing a moment of domestic life. A yucca fiber sandal lies where it was dropped, a corn cob rests in a storage room, handprints are still visible in the dried plaster. Mesa Verde is not a story of collapse, but of strategic retreat and resilience. It showcases a civilization that made a brilliant, hard choice to live on the edge, and then, when the edge could no longer support them, made the even harder choice to leave it all behind. Their legacy is a ghost city of stone, a testament to human adaptability in the face of a changing world, and a poignant reminder that sometimes the ultimate act of preservation is walking away. The final city rises not from a continent but from the sea itself. Early European sailors approaching the island of Pompeii in Micronesia would have witnessed a sight that made no sense to their navigational charts. There, upon a shallow coral reef, stood a grid of 92 artificial islets, each one constructed from colossal, prism-shaped logs of basalt stone, some weighing up to 50 tons. Canals of seawater flowed silently between these geometric platforms, earning it the later nickname, the Venice of the Pacific. This was Nan Madol, the ceremonial and political heart of the Sordilor dynasty, a city engineered to separate the divine rulers from the common people they governed. Built between the years 1200 and 1500 of the Common Era, Its very existence is a logistical puzzle that stretches our understanding of what a small island society could achieve. The basalt columns, with their striking hexagonal and octagonal shapes, were quarried from the opposite side of Pompeii. To move millions of tons of this stone across miles of ocean to the reef site, the builders likely employed a fleet of rafts, timing their journeys with the tides and currents in a monumental, generations-long effort of communal labor. The result was a sacred administrative capital, a place of royal residence, ceremony, and ritual. The largest islet, Nan Dawas, features towering walls 25 feet high, enclosing a central tomb complex, speaking to a society with a highly centralized and stratified power structure. Yet this concentration of authority may have sown the seeds of its own undoing. Oral histories passed down for centuries tell of a ruling class that grew increasingly demanding, with heavy tribute burdens placed upon the populace. The system appears to have collapsed, not from outside invasion, but from internal rebellion or the exhaustion of the very resources and social goodwill required to sustain such an isolated, resource-intensive enclave. When the Sordilor dynasty fell, the city was largely abandoned, its stone canals left to the quiet encroachment of mangrove roots. Its story, preserved only in local legend, remained almost as isolated as the ruins themselves until documented by outsiders in the 19th century. Nan Madol stands as a breathtaking capstone to our journey, a city that seems to defy its own context. It is a monument to human ambition erected not on solid continental ground, but on a constructed foundation in the world's largest ocean, a testament to the drive to create order and meaning even in the most remote corners of the earth. The stories of these cities are not isolated mysteries, but chapters in a much larger human chronicle. Stepping back from the individual ruins, a powerful rhythm begins to emerge, a recurring pattern of how civilizations become lost and how they are found. The forces that erased them fall into a few profound categories. Many were overcome by environmental pressures, whether a gradual shift like the droughts that emptied Mesa Verde and the Maya lowlands, or a sudden geological event like the earthquake and liquefaction that sent Heracleion into the sea. Others faltered from what we might call ecological overreach, where the very drive to build, as on Rapa Nui or perhaps at Tikal, compromised the environmental foundation that made the society possible in the first place. Human actions sealed the fate of others through conflict like the siege of Tsaparang, through economic irrelevance as trade routes bypassed Petra, or through deliberate, strategic abandonment as seen at Machu Picchu and Cliff Palace. And finally, for many, it was simply the relentless, patient reclamation by nature, the jungle over Angkor or the desert sands over Caral, that performed the slow, quiet work of concealment. Their rediscoveries, too, follow a pattern. For centuries, the keys were chance, like the farmer's well in Zion or the rancher's stray cattle in Colorado, combined with persistent local legend and the determined quest of individuals like Schliemann or Bingham. Now, a new chapter in discovery is being written by technology. Tools like LIDAR act as digital archaeology, letting us peer through dense forest canopies in the Amazon or the Cambodian jungle to see the precise geometry of civilizations that left no stone unturned, but whose earthworks were invisible to the naked eye. This collective narrative does something extraordinary. It dismantles the comforting idea of history as a straight, upward line of progress. Instead, we see a tapestry of cycles, of brilliant societies that rose, adapted, thrived for centuries, and then, for a complex web of reasons, stepped back from the stage. Their achievements in urban planning, engineering, art, and astronomy were not lesser. They were simply different, and their ends were not failures but transformations. Each rediscovery is a humbling reminder that our current global civilization is not the first to scale such heights, nor is it immune to the very patterns that gently buried these places under sand, water, and vine. They stand as silent mentors, their stones holding lessons about sustainability, about resilience, and about the fragile, incredible things human communities can build together. The true legacy of these cities is not in their silence, but in their stubborn refusal to stay lost. They whisper to us across centuries, not as cautionary tales of inevitable decline, but as profound testaments to human ingenuity and adaptation. Every carved stone in Petra, every plaster cast in Pompeii, every laser-mapped causeway in the Amazon is a message in a bottle, washed ashore in our modern era. They tell us that civilizations are not monoliths destined to fall, but complex organisms that breathe, change, and sometimes choose to transform in the face of immense challenge. The people of Mesa Verde did not fail when they walked away from their cliffside homes. They succeeded in making the difficult decision to ensure their community's survival elsewhere. The builders of Nan Madol did not err in their ambition. They achieved a staggering feat of engineering that still defies easy explanation. These places remind us that endings are often just transitions, and what we interpret as collapse is frequently a strategic pivot written in the language of archaeology. Their rediscovery is a collaborative act between the past and the present, a dialogue where our technology meets their artistry and our curiosity unlocks their stories. This ongoing conversation enriches our understanding of what it means to build a society, to create meaning, and to leave a mark upon the world. It challenges us to think about the marks we are making today and how they might be read by generations far in the future. The next layer of the tapestry is always being woven. Perhaps it is being woven right now in a university lab where a researcher stares at a LIDAR scan, in a farmer's field where a strange pottery shard has turned up, or in a community working to preserve a local site of deep historical meaning. The adventure of discovery is never truly over, it simply changes form. If these journeys into forgotten worlds have captivated you, there are countless more mysteries waiting to be explored. Please subscribe to join us as we continue uncovering history's greatest enigmas. And we would love to hear from you. Share in the comments which lost city you find most astonishing, or which story resonated most deeply. Your perspective, your curiosity, adds a vital thread to the ongoing, incredible story of our shared human past.